Intro.
There you go.
Boom.
There, the intro is done.
You're good.
Oh, Father's Day.
I'm going to do the whole thing in Morse code.
Do it.
That would be a good Father's Day, you know.
I have no clue what Morris
No,
code
me
is.
neither. Some bunch of
No.
tapping.
We get one,
Right.
one viewer.
Right.
Yeah. And he's not even got the
Man.
sound turned up. He's just watching my hand.
Why did Tim the Toolman Taylor pop into my head? Just straight up.
I don't know.
For Father's Day?
Yeah. It brings me back. I don't know why.
The Bensford 2000?
The
Benford. Benford. Benford 2000.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is funny, man. I could get new tools all day long. That's a great gift idea. I don't know why I'm talking about gift ideas.
Well, it's
don't-
Father's Day. I mean,
I only like to get, well, my kids or my wife or whoever, they'll ask, hey, what do you want? And it sounds terrible. And it may be. Y'all can tell me at home if you think it is. I always ask, what's my price range?
it's good to know.
From $0 to $1 billion, I've got a list somewhere that's, let me know. And,
Well, I mean, you're paying for it anyway, so.
in some form or fashion.
Ultimately.
Yeah, in some form or fashion. Thank you, me. But, yeah, I don't normally like to get tools because that means I have to use them. And I don't want to.
I don't know. My woodworking tools are like therapy.
Yeah. I'm in
Like
the
it's
same
an
way.
opportunity to
Right.
like, leave me alone, let me go. Funny story, I just thought of this. So a friend that I work with was talking about his father-in-law. I guess his mother-in-law is not fun to be around all the time.
Yeah?
He was like, he walked in because his father-in-law disappeared and was like, hey, I got to go take care of some stuff out in the shop. So he had been out in the shop for a while, and, you know, he was like, well, I think I'm going to go check on him. And he walks in there, and he has fallen asleep under the car with just his legs laying out.
Oh, no.
And went in there for peace and quiet. And he was like, woke him up. He's like, what are you doing? He was like, I'll be honest with you. He goes, sometimes whenever I've had enough, I come out here to the shop and I'll like take a hammer and like knock it on the, you know, piece of wood for a little while. And then I'll go through my phone and check some things, hang out, drink a beer, hammer on something for a little while, make some more noise. He goes, sometimes I'll climb under the car. He goes, and every now and then I'll just fall asleep.
Fair enough.
Like, oh,
Seems like a great safe place to fall asleep.
no.
Yeah, under a car. Well, as long as all four wheels are still on it, you should be fine. You just don't want to wake
Just don't
up
turn
abruptly.
it on. Don't do. Yeah.
I
Well,
just
no,
hope
but-
it never gets that bad at home that I have to
fall
escape
asleep under
like
the car.
that.
What I
That
was
is a
thinking,
funny story.
what I was thinking though, is like, okay, so law enforcement and your idea of relaxation and that kind of thing is woodworking tools. So I wonder, because from a construction background,
It's yours to go chase bad guys.
if I could arrest people, honey, I'll be back. Put my little badge on. I'm gonna go arrest people for the weekend.
Oh yeah,
And just,
a little
you
stress
know,
relief. Well, yeah,
I'm just cooling off. It's good.
I love
I mean,
building
I think
stuff too. So
I think it'd be a great idea. I think
Yeah.
you should let me try. Let me try.
take his satchel.
Yeah.
With some of the weapons we've shown over the last couple episodes. And
I've never seen a cop with a crossbow.
y'all are more
Listen.
than welcome to come on a ride.
weren't
out.
we talking about
I
the new
want to.
tasers?
I
He'd love to
definitely do.
test some new tasers,
Ah.
right?
No. No. I
himself?
just want to pull him over.
I did take one
You
of
don't
my
wanna tase
military
anybody?
buddies early whenever I was working patrol. He had moved to town and was actually applying for the police department. He came and rode out with me, and that was in my let's just say I was eager and chasing down anything and everything that moved days.
Jaywalker.
So maybe not there. I was looking for a little bit higher stuff, but
I said freeze.
he was like,
A
"All right,
water boy
dude."
popped
He was
in my
like,
head with him.
"What do I
smearing-
do? What like if
jaywalker.
something goes down? What do I do?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, if I get out of this car and I'm in a fight with someone, I expect you to get out of that car and assist me in that fight. Otherwise, whenever I arrest them, I'm coming back for you.
Yeah.
So I was like, and then you got to hit this button, and that'll release the shotgun. Like, if you need to get to it and use it. And he was like, oh.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to go. Let's go right along. They probably won't let me. They probably won't let me in the car.
He was chomping at the bit.
No,
We're gonna go through a
it's
full
probably
background
too much
check.
of a
before-
scary. You got to ride in the back, sir, and I'm like, nah. I've heard that before.
It's not a trick, I swear.
Yeah, I'll go do some woodworking. Good. Look what I made. It's Texas. So Father's Day weekend's coming up, and we're all dads.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for Mother's Day, the Podfather got letters from Mom and stuff. And so, kind of some of the things I was thinking, because I think at a certain point it's like, okay, yeah, it's Father's Day, and I start thinking about my dad, of course.
Right.
And some crazy stories or some funny stories or some things like that. And so I thought, just as a tribute to our dads, if they even watch it, boy, I don't know how to work this.
Stories?
What's a great story? What's a great story you got about your dad?
So my dad was a practical joker. Like, he wanted to embarrass you in public. He wanted to do whatever he could to embarrass you. And like his telltale ones were, and I remember this as a kid, being little. We'd go to the grocery stores with my stepmom, and he would like break off from her, and we'd be in the fresh produce area, and he'd go grab a banana and then chase her through the Albertsons with a banana, yelling "Fun with fruit." Look, fun with fruit, and just waiting for everybody to turn and look. Like, he would probably do real well in this TikTok age of making videos.
Dude would have been a billionaire.
What else has he done?
Sponsored by Fruit of the Loom.
We were at the mall one time, and we were in like a J.C. Penney's, Dillard's type area, and I think we were looking for clothes for me. So we're like in the kids area looking for clothes, and my dad wanders off, and like the women's section was right next to it. So he goes over to the lingerie, and like across the shopping center holds up like a little negligee. It's like, "Hey, Tony, you think your husband would mind?" So he would just try and walk behind you with like a weird limp. And then you'd like be walking, and everybody'd be looking like really weird at you, and you'd be like, "What are they?" And you turn around, and he's behind you trying to do
Elephant Man.
I don't know who that homeless guy is.
Yeah. Like I remember when we graduated from boot camp, and we're down on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, and we're all in our dress blues walking, and him and my mom were up in front of me, and it's like the walkway is not that big on the Riverwalk. You got all the restaurants, and then usually the hostesses are out front, and they've got the menus and the rolled up silverware all up front. So he's in front of us, and there are like 6 of us behind, and we're walking together, and it's like 2, 2, 2, because it's narrow, right? Well, he walks by, and he grabs the rolled up silverware, looks back. I don't see this. Looks back, grabs one, and just chunks it behind him. So it unravels in the air, and it hits me in the chest, and silverware goes flying everywhere. So, of course, and he just keeps walking. So everybody's looking at us, and he's laughing as he's walking off. He would do
The jokester.
embarrassing things. Drive off with me in a parking lot and disappear, and then come back around the building the other way and just think it's hilarious. He's the one that keeps driving off as you're trying to open up the handle.
Yeah. Yep.
That's him. Yeah,
So, did you inherit any of those,
a little bit. Yeah.
or was it like, I've had enough of this, and
Oh no, it's if I had to go through it, son, you're gonna have to go through it.
just checking. Some people are like, I went through this as a kid. I'm never, ever doing this.
Oh no, I
man.
get looks from my mom, from Casey all the time. Like,
Yeah.
You've perfected that walk.
You are Dale Laborde. And I'm like, oh.
Oh, well. Good.
So
What about you, Jeff?
It's funny because my dad, man, he's an interesting character. I mean, grew up South Side, like looking
Chicago?
at his life.
really?
Yeah,
know.
I know.
I had
But
no
he
idea.
used to describe life to me like the movie Outsiders, right? So he was, South Side, poor neighborhood, 33rd and Archer, right outside of, it's literally right by Comiskey Park growing up. So I didn't even have a chance. I was a White Sox fan. I can't even say that at birth. Sorry to anybody who's a fan.
It is
of
hard
the
to say that
Cubs.
out loud.
Yeah, especially right now. It's tough. I mean, I knew Shoeless Joe Jackson back in the day. Now I'm that old. But my dad wasn't like handy. So when I was a kid, I loved woodworking even in high school. And there's stories of him. Like I'd come home and there'd be a brand new miter saw sitting on a stack of wood floor planks. And he'd go, hey, if you lay that wood floor, that saw is yours. So 12 hours later, my dad had a new wood floor. And he's like, he'd teach me those things. My dad didn't know how to change the oil on lawnmowers. So every time a lawnmower would die out, he'd just go buy a new one because he didn't change the oil on the lawnmowers.
Makes sense.
So essentially, I started fixing his lawnmowers.
They're
for him and stuff
disposable.
like that. But he grew up in the city. It was different. He probably had a lawn that was as big as this table in front of us when he was a kid. So it wasn't like one of those big things. But, as he progressed and got things, he was left-handed. He probably was born with 2 left feet, and he was a little bit klutzy. I remember my grandfather, when he was dating my mom, I always got told a story of how they went to what we call Wolf Lake up north, and they were fishing. Well, my dad gets in the boat with my grandfather. He catches a fish. He gets so excited he falls out of the boat. And my grandpa's like, oh, he'll pop back up. Like a minute went by, and my dad's still underwater. And my grandfather had to reach in and pull him out. And he's like, I thought your dad was going to die. He's like, I didn't know he couldn't actually like swim and keep himself up there. So it's funny. My dad hears these stories and he goes through and he's like, you're making fun of me. And we're like, no, but it is funny.
Yeah.
It is funny.
I was like, yes, we are.
But man, more than anything, my dad was tough, South Side rule follower, very adamant, very strong, stringent voice. And I probably was like that with my kids to start too, where I'd, I was more of a dictator than a dad to start. And I felt like that's...
Glad you elaborated on that.
Yeah.
Great place to pause.
Yeah.
What a word to cut off.
I know.
That's
But
a real dick.
Tater. Tater. I like tater tots. It's good. But
Oh, boy.
no, but
And take 2.
it's all good. I don't want to paint it in a negative light, because one thing he taught me though is he loved my mom well all the time, and I saw that growing up, and it taught me how to be a husband. And he still to this day, my mom walks on water for him, and
That's interesting.
yeah, no, and it just that whole vision of that, like I just carried that into my relationship. And I found out there's give and take, and luckily Brooke didn't take too much of an advantage of that, but that aspect was something I carried with me. And man, he always thinks he didn't do enough in certain ways, and I'm like, I wouldn't have learned how to do all these things, like change the oil on a lawnmower, change some tires, change the oil on a car, fix cars myself. If
If it wasn't for his ineptitude.
didn't want to do it.
If it wasn't
Thanks,
because
Dad.
he couldn't.
Yeah. So, and it become
I say that with love. I'm
right,
sorry,
but
sir.
it still became an interesting hobby for me, where I just became curious, because he was like, well, I just drop it off somewhere. They take care of that stuff for me. I mean, he was the epitome
Right.
of city boy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like, why do it if I can pay somebody to do
yeah,
it?
he's not country.
Yeah.
That was my
I work with a
father-in-law.
lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like,
What? I'll work 2 shifts of overtime
So
that I don't have to spend the time doing that to pay somebody else to do it. I'm like, dude, get out there and do it.
yeah. Well, and that's where I had my grandfather. Was my mom's father was completely a hillbilly from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Just complete opposite. And he was the one that's like, boy, come let me teach you how to do this.
Right.
He was the one that had the wood shop in his basement, and he'd probably be down there pounding on wood, hiding from the wife that was dictating to him things to do. So, yeah.
He painted
Going back
such a
to
good
that word.
picture on that of just like sitting there drinking his beer and going, dong, dong, dong. Just whatever he could do. I'm busy.
yeah,
Yeah.
can't even hear you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Go ahead and go to bed. I'll be working late.
But man, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents.
Yeah, I'll hammer quiet.
As a kid, and he's the one that taught me how to fish. He taught me how to do all the things, and it was fun. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. So
The story I thought of is not serious whatsoever.
Mine and my dad aren't either.
No.
my dad almost dying, falling out of a boat fishing with his.
You see, and my dad would have done that as a joke.
Yeah.
My dad would have intentionally fallen out of the boat to freak everybody out.
To be funny, like we were actually with Brooke's parents because they grew up near a lake, and we were swimming with the kids, and my dad's with us, and he fell out of the boat, and the same thing happened, and we're like, holy crap, he's not coming back up.
He still hasn't learned.
Dive in. And then finally he comes up and we're like, whoa, he's alive.
Yeah. That's for making fun of me all those years.
It's only 2 feet deep. Stand up.
I have a story about that
Definitely
too.
deeper.
But that wasn't my dad.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear your
It was my
story.
mom. Well, so
Or
and,
one of
and
them.
I haven't figured out. my dad's funny. He does some weird things, and we're like, he grew up out in the country, and so country boy and hunting and fishing and blah blah blah, all those kind of things. But my dad has this weird aversion to possums. He doesn't like them. He can't stand and I don't know why. I don't know which possum was the first offender, but dude, he hates.
Run from
possums.
them?
No,
Or
no.
we'll
like
murder
Like
them.
we'll kill them to death.
Just murder them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and has
I didn't hear the head pop
taken
when I ran it over.
has taken several to task. We're gonna. That's how I'm trying to keep it. So anyway, one evening we're sitting in the backyard, and I think we've been cooking or barbecuing or something, right? We're sitting in lawn chairs and we're just talking, dude, and this possum comes up over the chain link fence and comes down in the back, and they had cats, and so a little cat food bowl, and I guess he had figured out, hey,
Free food.
I can eat here. And so it's kind of like creeping, like doing its thing, and we're there, and we had gotten real quiet when it came over. And he goes, all right, boy. He said, I'm going to jump up and go around it and chase it into this corner. He said, you go over there and grab that piece of rebar. And when I get in the corner, you come right behind me, and I'll move, and you whack it. And I'm like, man, sounds like a plan.
Whack-a-mole.
Why not? And first of all, I didn't think the possum was going to cooperate. It's like, really, you're going to corral this possum? Okay, well, fine. Everything worked. So he jumps up, he goes around the possum runs, I run, I grab the rebar, I've got it in a great possum smashing grip, and I'm coming in, and all I could see is like he's turned and he's hunched over in this fence, like, in the corner of a fence. And the next thing I hear is, here, boy, catch this.
He grabs his tail.
And he had grabbed the possum, this live possum. And it's dark. There's only floodlights on the back porch kind of thing. And this thing is flying through the air at my head. And I'd like to say it was a very manly scream. And, you know, I didn't even swing at the pitch. I took it. It was a ball. It was high. It was at my head. Needless to say, this possum got thrown through the backyard at me. I ducked.
Manly.
And it missed me.
Duck.
Yeah, there was a manly duck while screaming. Good God, what have you done? And, and he escaped. But, my dad, I tell you, my dad has actually thrown a live possum at me.
Was this like last year?
No. It's still, there's a traumatic, every now and then I see a possum in my dreams. But, no, he thought it was hilarious. And, I don't know why. But, he threw a live animal at me. And
why are there so many things that we
escaped.
think are funny that our kids just don't?
Well, I think, because my dad will tell me stories too about, when they were kids and my grandfather and my great grandfather and like, just that dynamic growing up. They're country boys and my dad, like my grandmother had my dad in them. My grandmother was the second oldest of 12 kids. So my great grandmother was still having children at the same time. And so my dad has like an uncle that's a year older than him and an uncle that's a year younger than him and another like 3 or 4 after that kind of thing. And they all lived in the same town. They all grew up together. And so some of the stuff that they would get into, which I think is things like our kids think nowadays, like how in the world did y'all ever...
What part of Arkansas was that?
It wasn't. It was here in the great state of Texas.
Love you guys from Arkansas.
Yeah, way down there in the south. But yeah,
Victoria.
it was. They were in Port Lavaca, Cuero,
Okay.
and
Some gobblers.
yeah, it was something else. So that's what we did, and it was good.
I remember, I think my dad, like, I can't stand basketball.
Mm.
And I think my dad is the reason I can't stand basketball because he would always
Beat you.
Oh, dude. Like, no mercy whatsoever, no matter how old I was. And I mean, I was a decent athlete growing up, but it didn't matter. Like, and he would always, come on, let's go shoot some, and it would start off with a little simple game of like horse or something. And he's like, all right, let's 21.
So maybe we should.
And he would just obliterate me. Like, not even. And he could hit shots. I don't know how he did this because I've never been able to, but he could hit from the corners. So no backboard and just poof, like with ease, and would just decimate me and like rub it in my face as he's doing it to the point now I can't stand basketball, But then I have a huge love for football, and my brother's 9 years younger than me. So we used to set up the living room, and there was a couch on one side and a couch on the other, and we would sit in the middle, and we would play football, and the couches were the end zone. So me and my brother would play, and he'd be like all-time quarterback, and I'm talking diving catches, as kids reaching out, trying to land onto diving over each other, tackle, and then my stepmom would come in, and she had this, I'll never forget this, she had this, so ugly too, but like this terracotta fish, because they used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, and she got this terracotta fish in there that she just loved, like more than her kids, her husband.
It was priceless.
I don't know. It was terracotta and it was ugly. And she would always come in there, you break my fish and I break your face. And like dead serious too. So we would always have to avoid the terracotta fish.
It was its own defensive.
Which is so much fun.
Defensive
like
back.
As a kid. And of course my brother's 9 years younger than me, so I'd have to be on my knees. He'd be standing up. Man, we just had so much fun doing that.
Talking about it as a kid, grandparents or parents, whoever, have that room that had like furniture covered in plastic that was wrapped. That if you touched anything,
My
in
grandmother
there,
had a runway.
they'd kill you.
That was,
It was like
that was my
that's the death room.
grandmother on my mom's side's entire house.
Yeah.
It wasn't wrapped in plastic,
we
but
had-
it was, if you touch that,
But it's
you
like
know.
this like form-fitting zipper plastic that they
No.
put on, and if you go sit on there and you bring food in that room, you might not live that day.
Yeah.
Well, I just like my
I'm like, there's plastic on it.
my
It's
my
protected.
grandparents like smoked in the house and everything, but they've got like this 3-foot. I just called it the runway, and it went like
A rug?
No, dude,
Oh.
it was plastic, like that hard
Yeah, I know what
plastic
it's
with the
if
little
you flip it
pokey-
over,
Pokey's on the
you-
bottom.
Pokey's on the
you-
bottom.
you flip
I
that
know
over
everybody
just to be
knows the
funny.
pokey's
Yeah,
on the bottom. Yeah. And so it went from the living room door and went straight through and went into the kitchen. And then there was another one that tied in there and went down the hallway to the bedrooms, bathroom.
On carpet.
On top of the carpet
Yeah.
to save the carpet.
From the walk pattern.
But I'm like, it smells like an ashtray
oh.
inside. And
you're
this
worried
is
about-
and you're worried about this strip of carpet. We walk everywhere else on the
Well, the best
carpet.
thing
Why
is-
is this?
You lift that strip up,
And it's all
got-
crushed.
it's
and has the
crushed.
little
It's-
pokey.
And the little divots all
and
through it.
say it's gray.
Yeah.
Everything else is charcoal gray, and that's like light gray.
Oh
Right,
no, dude!
because the sun hadn't penetrated. Yeah.
There was nothing.
Stains on
Everything
all
was
that.
like yellowish.
yeah.
But
What happened?
that's how they were. That's how they grew up.
I remember-
and that's
It's
yeah.
funny you say that because I remember my grandmother was a smoker, and I think my grandfather passed away when I was 11 or 12. And like the one thing I remember about my grandfather is he would always be out by the barbecue pit, and he would always have his drink in his hand. I want to say his drink was like a vodka drink. I remember it being clear. And my grandmother always drank Dewar's. Like she always had a big old handle of Dewar's, and she smoked. And I never understood because she would light it, take a couple of drags, and she would, because we had those ashtrays in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
house with the middle, with the little places that you
They
put
were
it.
all over the place.
And she would take a
My
couple of
grandpa,
drags, she
too.
would set it down, she would walk off, and she would get preoccupied with cooking or cleaning or something and come back, and that whole thing was ash. Hadn't
Yeah.
even moved or dropped.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And it's
the
got that
s-
ash that's like
That's
that long.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And I'm like,
And then you
what
want to
in
touch
the
it,
world?
and they're like, oh,
Yes.
And like, so I wasn't worried about secondhand smoke as a kid.
And light another one.
Yeah.
And then take 2 or 3 drags, set it down, and walk away. And
yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah. It was interesting. Going back to our dads, what would you say is something? I was kind of thinking like, so like me growing up, my dad was in church. My dad was a believer. My dad, had, faith in those things and went to church kind of like we go to. It's, evangelical, charismatic, full action kind of thing. And it was a little weird, whatever, right? Being a young kid and not understanding what's going on. And, but like, and I tell him because it's one of the most impactful memories I have. And I was probably early teens.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't young, but it was early teens. And man, the church was small and the music was terrible, and it wasn't terrible, but it was different. And I remember being in there in service, and I'm standing there, and my dad's got his eyes closed, he's got his hands up, and there's just tears pouring down his face. And he's singing this song at the top of his lungs. And it's like I'm looking. I remember I wasn't taller than him yet. And I'm just like, this is so... Like, this is not the picture that, the men don't cry picture, the stay in the back, that type of thing. And I'm just looking. And it was like, man, that image is like burned into my brain when it comes to worship, when it comes to men worshiping, when it comes to those kind of things. And it was like, that was always there's no too far to go when you're pouring your heart out, when you're in. And I don't know, he may have been going through a thing. It's not like he stands there and just cries all the time or anything like that. But the moment to me was significant because you learn, or you're taught through different things or whatever. It's like, well, men behave this way. Mm-hmm. Men act this way. Men this and that. Yeah. And I'm looking at this contrary picture to what I thought was normal. And, it's not like I had full understanding or anything at the moment. It was like burned into my brain. And as I got older, and, the first ministry I got started in was worship ministry. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that picture is just, it's there. It's burned in my brain. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it became a significant thing for me. It became something in my life that I was like, wow. And it wasn't, man, he wasn't worried about me. He wasn't worried about what I thought. What is my boy going to think? He wasn't worried about any of that. It was him and God, and in that moment. And it's been something that's inspired. It's been something to aspire to, as far as just.
So it's been a positive image.
Oh,
for you
absolutely.
From the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at the very beginning, it freaked me out. I was like, my dad's having a nervous breakdown. Something's wrong with him. I don't know what's going on. Because I'm a kid, you don't understand. And
but over time, it became.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you get there because, like, our dads grew up in a time where, like, showing emotion was not a thing. So I think every time my dad did show emotion in his life, in front of me in any way, I could probably count it on one hand, and I remember each moment. But, in a different way, I grew up in a Catholic church, and early,
emotionless.
Yeah, it really is in a different way, not to knock it, but at the same time, it was to that rule, stringent.
Yep. There's a devotion that still gets applied that.
Right. I got to kneel, sit, stand, and when I wasn't kneeling properly, I got a little smack, and when I was too squirmy in the pew, I got another smack, and the different things that go there.
Who's that guy holding his kid under the holy water? Right.
But he was baptized.
Dude, it was the nuns, man. The nuns were mean.
Listen, I went to a Catholic high school.
But CCD,
I understand.
Did you do CCD as a kid? And
so I was in Catholic schools from kindergarten all the way to my sophomore year, and then my junior and senior year, I went to a Baptist private school. So private schools all the way
was different.
through. It was a change.
One whacked with the left hand.
The Catholic is definitely different.
Yeah.
And I mean, my principal for the longest time, I think whenever I went to St. Thomas More, I went in 4th and then graduated in 8th. So for those years that I was there, the principal was a nun, and like, man, you feared her.
But I think even in his heart, he rebelled against the idea of you have to do specific tasks to be saved. And I think I told you all, one of the greatest things I ever saw is in the last 6-7 years, my dad got baptized in front of my dad and my mom, and man, that was emotion right there. Yeah,
for sure.
And he had emotion in that situation too, so that's one of those 5 times that I could recall in my life. And I didn't see that as a kid, but further in life, God has basically shown me those points in his life where he was just doing his best to hold it together for the family at the time when he could.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was leading in different ways where he didn't really fully understand it either. Like that love that he showed for others around him, even though he didn't think he was doing it at those times. And that is like that picture of God's love. And I think he finally got that. And that's why he got baptized later. It's fully understanding, like, it's not about position. It's about a loving father. And that, like, when he got that, that's when I did see that emotion, you know. But that breakdown was in his 60s, 70s, as opposed to early in my life. But still.
Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I saw a clip from a podcast, and I guess it's called like the Savage Man or something, and it was like it's supposed to be, and man, it kind of ticked me off because the guy was like, real men only cry for birth and for death. And that's the only time that a man should cry. Like, there's no other excusable time. The way that we're built, and men, at the birth of your son or daughter, you should cry, and at the death of your parents or whatever, you should cry, and no other time in between. And I'm like, what? And if you do, you're not, that's not what a man is. And I'm like, bro, like, I challenge you to go and say that in front of some of these UFC fighters that cry in victory or cry in defeat. Like, you cannot tell me that those aren't men,
Right.
by the definition of what we all look at a man to be. And then, like, you're
biology.
talking about, exactly. What is a man?
That's my definition.
But like you said, like, there are times, like, and it doesn't have to be a sad cry. It could be a happy cry.
Right.
And it could be a cry for no reason whatsoever.
War cry?
And it's just war cry. Or possums coming at me cry.
Yeah. It was a yell. It was a warrior's
Scream.
yell.
It was a scream.
I meant like
a girly shrill, you said, right?
It was.
But
It was a high pitch. I mean, because that instills fear in the enemy.
Right. You were trying to scare the possum.
Exactly.
Because they do, like, I mean, they fake dead, and you were just
I was trying to knock him out in the air.
in the air.
Yep.
That makes sense now. Mm-hmm. That's a different
It
picture
didn't
than
work.
I actually.
Didn't work.
But I just think it's sad that there are people out there that are trying to say that men can't show emotion, and that there are only 2 times that you can show emotion. And if you show emotion any time in between, you're not a man. And I'm not saying that we should be crying and sniffling and all emotional 24/7.
But
But there are times.
Absolutely. And I think the balance, too, is important because you can't be a basket case.
No.
Like, and just literally cry all the time.
No.
And if my kids are watching, they'll be like, Dad, you cry a lot. It's important
My
times.
kids would say it too.
And,
throw on Rudy and I'm done. Waterworks come on.
No. And like for me, I remember growing up and my parents divorced and all of that, and it came with its own challenges. And I was like the kid, my brother, as soon as like you went after him, spank him, discipline, whatever, dude, that dude would start crying from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Like it was on. Waterworks, full meltdown. And, 95% of it is an act of just have pity and grace and please just don't hit me. And I was the defiant one. Mm-hmm. I was the one, and I'm talking like, for us, they make us lean over like the
not
bed.
Getting a reaction out of me.
And I put your hands on the bed kind of thing and lean over, and you're going to get a spanking. Dude, and I would have that comforter and like nails digging into my hands, and it's like, you can kill me first because I'm not giving you the satisfaction. And I think we tested both ends of that. Sometimes I won, sometimes I didn't. And this isn't this isn't my dad. My dad, like I said, my parents were divorced, and so when we would go see my dad, it was a different dynamic because he was, he's dealing with his own stuff and things of, he's got us every other weekend. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to spend the time getting after us, but we were wild, and so sometimes he had to. And that part was its own challenge. And but the point I was getting at, it was like, there was all of this built up, just I'm not, and bottling off emotions and bottling off those kind of things. And I actually hate crying.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Why?
I
Yeah,
know it's
no.
appropriate. I'm not saying like I hate it like it's bad. I'm just saying I hate me doing it.
Right.
And over the last several years, because dude, it doesn't matter. I can be saying something or whatever, and it's like this emotion starts to well up, right? And before I know it, there's just manly. It's like salt water, yeah, coming out of my eyes, and I'm like, God, why? Why can't I just tell this story? Why can't I just read this verse? Why can't I just sing this song? Why can't I just... And he was like, I need you to understand the fullness of your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You need to be able to feel, because I'd closed off those places in me that wanted to feel anything,
Right.
whether good, bad, otherwise. It's like you build a bridge or a dam, and it holds all the emotions back, not just the good ones or the bad ones or whatever.
Sometimes you got to let the water out, right?
I don't plan to. It just happened.
Yeah, right.
And now I don't even apologize for it. I'm like, yeah, here we go. Whatever. Listen to what I'm saying. Forget what I'm doing. And
Man, I
yeah.
can feel it, like in the things that you're, like, just when you're in a situation and your passion's coming out. Like I'll well up at those points, you know, because I'm like, I'm really into this, you know.
Yeah.
I'm bought in. I'm sold out, and you know, it's like even the picture of God, and that's what He wants us to be for Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sold out to the point of recognition of what happened with His one and only Son for us to be here. And it's like, so like when I first learned that, that's where it started coming out more in me. And that's where my kids are like, you know, I'll watch Rudy, like I said, or The Hill, or some emotional sports movie. It always has to be a sports movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
It took, I was like, The Hill.
The kid from Texas.
Yes, the pitching
yeah.
movie with
Yeah. So,
Dennis Quaid.
and, but man,
Field
yeah.
of Dreams?
That's
Field
Kevin
of Dreams
Costner.
that's still
There was a
emotional
guy
for
without
me.
shoes in that one, right?
Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Remember he met him
from
Yeah.
Chicago.
on the south side of Chicago.
No, that's where that cornfield was, right there
On the
next to
edge.
the south side.
Poverty.
And it was the White Sox that came out of there.
Cornfield
It
of
was.
poverty.
And they only
It
had to
was.
mow the field, so they didn't know how to fix the lawnmower or change the
Oh,
oil.
Lord, here
either.
we go.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I'm seeing all of
See?
it tied together
Full
now.
circle.
Oh,
Full
geez.
circle.
I didn't realize. Anyway,
I didn't sit there like you all.
I did.
Oh.
I actually learned. My dad taught me my first 3 guitar chords.
Did we just jump from Field of Dreams to Deliverance?
Yeah,
Holy cow.
pretty much.
Hey.
Which was not in Texas either.
No.
When you get 3 ADD guys around the table, Happy Father's Day. That's
Yeah.
what happens.
No, I did. My dad used
Where were we?
to pick a guitar, and that
I'm
was one of
messing
the
around.
things I want to learn to play. Well, son, nah, I do. I want to learn. Okay, I'm gonna teach you. It's actually I'm gonna teach you the first song my dad taught me. So, okay, I didn't know. My grandfather only knew one song, and it was "Walk the Line" by Johnny Cash. But it's very, it's
Yeah.
very, you know the song, right?
Yeah.
And my grandmother hated that I was learning to play the guitar.
Why?
She's like, I've heard that song
Oh,
from
oh.
your grandfather.
It's the only one
I
he
have
knows.
heard
whole
that
life.
song from your dad learning that song, and now I've got to hear it again. And yeah, it was rough.
You were
but,
knocking Arkansas, but Johnny Cash is from Arkansas. So.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't say everything in Arkansas was bad. He was probably from the south side of Arkansas.
Where the cornfields are,
Yeah.
even though that was Iowa, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Dads, what do you think moving forward, trying to keep this on some set of rails? Because Father's Day gets, I would say it gets like that real cliched. Moms get like a lot of extravagance, and I'm not knocking moms. They're great. But it's like Father's Day turns into ties and socks and like it just kind of I feel like even over the years, it's gotten like less and less. And I'm not saying it's government conspiracy. That's several episodes back. You should check it out. But it's like, do you feel like the deterioration of men, masculinity, fathering, those type of things is a contributor to, we went from stupid, here's a question about possums, to deep thoughts.
Well, even so, they're layering holidays on top of it too. I mean, which isn't, I don't want to be dismissive of that, but it's like, let's surround it with as much as we can to basically almost diminish what it means to be a dad too, because you're part of that situation, right? But, you know, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to diminish Juneteenth there now too. And, you know, I'll say that,
No.
but that's
Is
all
it?
there. Yeah.
No, it's on Wednesday.
But it still like surrounds like during that day. And now that's a national holiday.
Well, and the whole month of
I ain't even talking about that. I ain't even talking about that.
pride comes before the fall.
yes, right.
Destruction.
Yeah. But still, like, and yeah, we'll get some comments on that comment for sure. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's like, how do we just push through that month? And so Kyler, my gift, he was born on Father's Day.
Oh,
So basically, Brooke's like, I've given you a gift for life, because he was physically born on Father's Day. So we'll be celebrating his birthday Saturday, his 16th birthday, which
Wow.
that's another story for another day. But yeah, I'm with you, and it's like that importance, that struggle, or even the role of what we are as fathers in our house and how we are spiritual leaders in our house is being pushed aside, because it's just a movement to take us away from being grounded in that, right? I don't want to get too much on a serious note, but I think that's...
Well, no, I mean, and I know, you know, talking about some of those struggles growing up, divorced home and different dynamics, and, you know, stepdad and dad on the weekends, and very different styles of leadership and all of those kind of things. And then, you know, you look at, for me, there were several men that were influential in a father type role. You know, my father-in-law was extremely healing for me in my young 20s, just establishing some things that, and none of this is a dig on, you know, on my dad. My dad and I's relationship is great now. Early 20s, I was struggling with a lot of things from past issues. And, you know, come to find out, when he and I finally sat down and talked, I didn't know half of what he was going through, and he didn't know half of what I was going through. And he wasn't understanding 100% of that half, and I wasn't understanding 100% of that half.
Right.
And you look at this dynamic where it just creates brokenness and unforgiveness and anger and all these things. And so, man, we sat there, I remember one day on the back of a tailgate in front of my grandmother's house, and we just talked and talked and talked. And I told him about all of the things growing up and what I thought, how it made me feel, and blah, blah, blah. And he told me about all of the things he was going through, you know, through that time period of somebody else raising his kids, of divorce, of broken homes, of feeling like, you know, he'd never marry again. There was a whole lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, at that time, my father-in-law was just he was great for me. And then I had, you know, a brother-in-law that was the pastor of the church and those kind of things, and super great. And, you know, all of these different people, and still there was that moment where it's like, okay, but I'm supposed to relate to God as Father. And man, that dynamic's hard.
Yeah.
That when it was rough in that season, when that's supposed to be like, we're supposed to model that, and circumstances happen, and it's like, how do I relate to that? How do I approach that? And that it's been several years of, early on, especially, just not getting it.
Well, but it's a culmination of experiences, right? And
well, yeah,
that's what's going to happen. And
perception creates your truth,
right?
Yeah.
But it also builds. I mean, when you fully surrender to and get to that point and see it, you can't turn away from it, and you see it in a different way. But yeah, I mean, there's things my dad didn't do great when I was a kid, and I'll never point a finger back at him, but we've had those moments too, to sit there and talk through like emotions. But that's the funny thing, is like my whole life up until the point where he was saved, like discussing emotions was not something he ever taught me to do or he would do. I learned that in marriage, and I learned that in other ways. And I learned, hey, like the more you talk it out, the more you bring things into light, the more healing there is in that, right? And there's still things that he has like come to start telling me, and he's like, I just can't, and it stops, and I'm like, man, you'll be completely free when you could just let that stuff go. And I respect you more than anything, and I don't know if those words ever really sink in, because I've had that one-on-one conversation where he's gotten emotional with me too, and that gave me a new picture, right? Because
I avoid those.
But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, that's a point where in our relationship he was finally vulnerable enough to have the conversation, and it's like, I just want that time, that extra time with him before the end of time for him to get really deep and be like, no, you did a great job. Even though you weren't perfect, you still did right. And I've done right by you, I hope. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's like how we got that vision of God. And I didn't get saved till I was 35 years old. So it's a different picture, maybe 33, 35, somewhere in there. 2012. What was I? But, and it's one of those things. And, it's like when you finally, something breaks in you, like you said, you mentioned before you were baptized 8 times. It's like every single time I was reborn in something, right? It's almost like that experience.
It would, I mean, honestly, it was less about the birth and more about the death.
Right.
That sounds bad, but it was like, this person needs to be gone. I'm tired of this dude. And he ain't got nothing good for me.
But that's all directed from our Father.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, I mean, even with that, part of it is just an understanding of, man, those prodigal type moments, what God wants to do when we make ourselves available, and seeing and understanding that he's not just waiting to, like, people with bad male role models or whatever, they're waiting for that other foot to fall. They're waiting for the screaming, yelling, punch you in the head, where's my smite button reaction from God. They're waiting for all judgment of, you've been doing it wrong, you're not measuring up, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that, and not the unconditional. I've been looking off from my front porch, waiting for you to come back. And as soon as I saw your little head poke up over the horizon, I started running.
Yeah.
And, that's that father picture in the prodigal son, where it's like, he said he saw him from afar, which means it was actively looking. And he didn't wait till he walked all the way to the porch or front or tent. Man, I don't know what they lived in. But it's like he was, there he is. And he just took off running. And that's a huge part.
So it's interesting you say that a lot of people that didn't have the best role models as fathers or father figures in their lives kind of treat their relationship with God like waiting for that. Mm-hmm. And like my parents divorced before. I don't ever remember them living together. And then my dad kind of moved away, went to Illinois, moved to Phoenix, was married to my stepmom, and was out of state from where I was for a while. And then my mom got remarried, and the first person that she remarried was just a mess, verbally abusive, like hearing them scream and cuss at each other, as I'm going to sleep, freaking out, not knowing, like young, not knowing what's going on. The next one was physically abusive to her, to me. That's where my sister came. That's the one that years down the road got remarried and then actually executed his two daughters. And then the next stepdad was more of the immature Toys R Us kid, I don't want to grow up type, adult that didn't want to do anything but party and was like cheating on my mom and just immature. Yeah. And while those were going on, these horrible examples of what a father, stepfather, male role model should be, my dad came back into the picture, but it was still that, go there every other weekend, spend limited time, like great memories and everything. And I looked back on that and was like, man, that's awesome. I cherish those moments. And then I had those other three examples that were just god awful and sent me into several years, probably from 16 to 2021 of just deep, dark. I didn't know it was depression at the time, but it was 100% depression. Like the things that I got into, like zero contact with my family. They would have to come and track me down, wherever I was to try and check in on me, doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And then straightening my life out, finding my wife, finding the church, having kids, and then, bam, I have kids, and I'm going, well, hold on. How did my dad ever move away? Like, I couldn't.
A whole nother dynamic.
I couldn't even, like, that never registered to me back then, and it wasn't until I had my own kids and I was like, oh, I ain't going anywhere. If something happens between me and Casey, I'm buying the house next door. Like, you're going to have to put up with me, but I'm going to be there with my kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, wait, how did he move out of state? Like, how could you do that? Yeah. How could you be away and like that doesn't compute in my head, So I struggled with that for a while.
Yeah.
Then I struggled with the horrible examples that I had, and it was like, I'm going to take what not to do and turn it in what to do.
Right.
And that's how I've tried to flip that. And then when you're saying the relationship with God, it was, when I got into the church, it was like, finally, a father that I know isn't going anywhere.
Oh,
it
no.
wasn't I'm waiting.
I was ducking and dodging. Like,
I wasn't. It was like an ultimate peace. Like, finally,
I get that.
I have something that I can trust in, something that I can lean on, something that I know isn't going to go anywhere. It's not going to hurt somebody that I love. It's not going to move to a different state. It's not going to do any of these horrible things. And that gave me a peace in everything that I do and a faith that when bad things happen, I know where I'm going.
I'm sitting here on a bell curve, like
I know.
basic economics, and I'm like, where what you need and what you want finally meet up, and then you're like, oh. And that light bulb goes off, and you're like, all right. It's peaceful.
I say
it's
it was
different.
instantaneous. I mean, it took me a little while to fully grasp, because like I said earlier, grew up Catholic. So, I mean, I've always believed in God, but the devil believes in God too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not a matter of believing in him. It's a matter of knowing who he is, what he's done for you, It's the relationship, not the religion. And it took me a while, to get there. And it took my wife taking me to a very small Pentecostal church that scared the ever living what out of me whenever I was there, with people screaming and running. But that's where, I finally, that's where I found God, and I built that relationship. And once I built that relationship, it was like, like when bad things happen, I know exactly where to go. Yeah. And I don't worry about them, because I know ultimately, as long as I'm listening, he's going to direct me where I need to go. And it may not be on the timeline that I want. It may not be in the direction that I want to go, but he's going to show me that path. And I just have to be in tuned enough to listen and know whenever he's talking to me. Yeah. So I wouldn't flinching like, oh no, here's another guy that's going to do this to me. It was like, finally, I don't have to flinch. Finally.
But then you see it. You see another kind of discipline.
Right.
And it's funny because people have even commented on what we've talked about in the show and said, oh, you just think it's easy. At that point, it gets tougher, because conviction comes into play, and you finally understand what that relationship means, and you're like, man, I got to change some things.
Oh, and convict. Yeah, I deal with conviction every day. It's
still,
like
on the daily.
Of course.
Falls short.
I mean, there's anyway. Yeah, we all sin.
But I think
we all have.
But I think the point is that we all have that different perspective and that different view, and you and I could have gone through very similar things. But my reaction to it is different than your reaction to it. And there's nothing wrong. Neither one of them are right or wrong. Just as long as we ultimately come to know.
We got to the same place eventually. Right. And it was different. It was different paths. I mean, and at the same time, it's like, I look at, I tell my boys and there's things as a dad now. And it's my boys and girls, but I'm thinking just kind of like a male bloodline, carry your family name kind of thing for the moment. I think of the things that my dad did go through, like in that time frame, where, like that worship kind of time frame, in that bubble of his, what really was a wilderness season. Dude, I'm telling you, there was a little closet in the bedroom, and I could hear my dad praying.
That's awesome.
And praying. And my dad would come out of this closet with relief and love and like tear streak. Man, he would be in there for hours and hours, and I'm like, what in the world is going? Yeah, of course my brain still went, my dad's having a meltdown, there's something wrong with him.
You wasn't in there with a hammer?
No.
Sleeping under a car.
He was only hitting himself with it. But it's like, and I think about, my grandfather was a good man. Worked hard, blah, 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 all of those stand-up kind of things, but was hard-hearted for a lot of years. And didn't get saved till late in his life, and actually right before, he passed away. And, and this whole time my dad's going through this thing. And so, I look at it now at, the prices that he paid for our family. You know what I mean? He's laying some groundwork of, this is how we carry our name. This is the type of men that we're going to be. This is the type of dads, and that example of prayer and worship and those things.
Laying down a legacy.
Exactly.
Right.
And it really kind of, for me, began at that place. And that doesn't mean I didn't have my own struggles and my own things and all that stuff growing up, but it's like I still had this clear picture. And so now I'm seeing my kids, man, they haven't gone through this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing, and their understanding of God and relationship. And I mean, last night my second son is giving a message at youth to kids that are younger than he is. I kind of snuck up. I went up the stairs. I was hiding in the dark and just watching and looking and going, wow.
Right.
You know, where that legacy started in tears and worship and heartache and, you know, some depressed times, some low times, all of that was backed in prayer and pouring out your heart to God. And those things have grown over the years. And I'm looking at 2 generations after going, my kids are going to be all right.
Right.
And if it continues, man, my goodness, it'll be great. And so, you know, because it is Father's Day, my part, Dad, that I am so grateful for. If you even watch this, I don't know if you watch. I know Mom does, because she always says, I watch it. Yeah, I know, Mom. But Dad, I'm absolutely grateful for that example. And I appreciate it and love you. So I talk to him like every other day. So we'll be like, anyway, yeah.
You're making me think I need to talk to my dad more. But at the same
What was
time,
that show where they're like, I gotta call my dad?
call him.
What was it?
We don't. Anyway. Men don't talk. What are you talking about? As we talk on a podcast, right? But no, it's the same way though. I mean, there's so much I appreciate, like in reflection, where I was ungrateful growing up, because I didn't grow up in a home where my dad was separate. He was always there, but where he thought he wasn't good enough in situations, and some of his battles were in that. I always sat back, and now even look at it more now, where I fed that sometimes, and I was a little bit of a smart aleck kid, and did things that probably helped build that up. He started to learn, no, man, I'm here. And that's the other piece, is there were things that weren't great growing up, and but there's never a finger being pointed back at it, because we're all imperfect. But you could see the generational curses being broken. And that feeling is amazing. And that relationship now is so different just based on that. And, I knew what brought him joy when I was a kid, and I even pressed to do that so much just because you want the love of your father.
Yeah, you want him to be proud.
To shine down on you. And so, I mean, that's why I tried hard in sports and different things and he loved watching me play baseball. That was it. And, but at the same time, like, I knew he had it tough. So, like, there was always a part of me that's like, how could I bring the joy and be that joy? Yeah. But then that's where you start to find out, hey, you don't need to be the joy, right? So, but my dad, man, he still, it's funny because we'll say my mom is the rock of our family. Like, she was always the glue holding things together, and she was the one that was talkative and outgoing. He was always in the background, calculating things, putting the pieces back together, and then just being there. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing he'd always be, is there. And, I love him for it. Love him for it. So
I'd like to say that I was a good kid growing up.
I know I was
horrible. My son's 16 now, and I'm like,
yeah. We're like, our kids are listening. That doesn't change expectations for them.
No, I just look up and I'm like, I know I deserve it, because I know I put my parents through so much hell. And I know that, part of it was through some of the stuff that I dealt with and went through, and I had a lot of resentment in my heart. And I know for a fact that there was a time, probably whenever I was 15, 16, 17, where I would intentionally do things, and I hate even saying this, to hurt them, to try and get a reaction, you know, to make them think, oh, this poor kid. And I look back on those and I'm ashamed of myself for them, you know, because I know I was a punk. Like, I just did things, said things, and maybe it's something that a lot of kids do whenever they're that age, but I look back on it and I'm like, why? And then now I have a 16-year-old kid, and I'm like, whenever he doesn't do it to the level that I did, but I'm like, all right, like, here we go. And then you got to pick up that phone and you got to be like, hey, Dad, he's doing exactly what I was doing. How'd you handle that? Mom, how did you, you know? And it's so if anything, Mom, Dad, sorry. But, and I will say this, like, the good things that my dad did was when he got remarried and married my stepmom and then had my brother, they did an amazing job, you know, with keeping, they went through so much stuff, and to keep their relationship together and to raise my brother the way that they did and the way that he turned out. Like, he's a behind the scenes pastor with ARC. And on the boat. Yeah. I'm trying to, I always mess up what ARC stands for. Related churches. So, I mean, he's bounced around from places with them, but he's always been that, like, he was the perfect kid and I was the one that always caused the problems. Like, he was the one that would rat me out for going too fast in a car whenever I was forced to take him with us to go run an errand.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, this is why I didn't ever want you in the car.
Sounds like my two boys right now.
But I will say that, like, what my dad did do is he found a church in Healing Place Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Like, we went there whenever it was in a basketball gym with folding chairs and under 100 people going there. And they have been with or a part of that church all the way through. And that definitely set an example for me, you know, with Healing Place. And then my mom did a good job, too, with the churches that she tried to get us into, or that she did get us into. So, I mean, they definitely set a good example whenever it came to relationship with God that got me to a place to, I think, where whenever I did find that relationship, I wasn't, you know, ducking, waiting for when's God gonna,
I think, you know, we all got, we have those things that seem to shape that dynamic, and I don't think that one is better, worse,
no, not
bigger,
at all.
bigger,
it's just different
lesser.
experience.
No, and I think it's always the thing that it's like God goes, if I can connect with you here, you know what I mean? Because He finds that place where it's kind of like we need Him most. We right. Like that initial connection, that initial, like, look here I am, here you are. Pay attention, look. Right. And, you know, for me, it was this and that. And I tried early on, young dad, I'm just going to do things opposite of what, like, I'm not going to be like this, and I'm not going to be like that. Man, the more I tried that,
those phases.
The more you were like that.
The more I was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that idea doesn't work for me. And, you know, it was really just different examples. And even now, like, I look at in those rough times, in those, man, I learned some valuable things.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't 100% bad. I mean, granted, I did not enjoy, but the way I learned those, still, it's like, as a man, as a dad, as a thing, whatever. Now it's like, man, I learned some amazing things. I learned some skills. I learned some things about
well,
myself in the process.
You guys knocked on me because we're talking about books a time or two ago in our podcast, and I'm sitting here naming all these leadership books and stuff like that, and you're like, no, man, I'm talking fiction. I'm like, what's fiction? I don't read fiction, right? And but it is that moment like where you realize in your walk that your generational curses, whatever's spoken over you, is not what your heavenly father is speaking over you. And you could develop yourself, but fatherhood, coaching, managing people, leading in anything that you're doing, leading young adults, leading everything, they all cultivate, but they all cultivate the same thing. Like, and those attributes bleed into each other. So the better you get and the more you increase your awareness, self-awareness in those situations and how you walk through them and how God walks you through them. And the more you hear and you're convicted, the stronger you get in those things and the better it becomes. Like, we're not going better best in this situation, but it's different. But different. And
It'll never die.
Yeah. I was going there, but that's it. It's exactly like, no, we learned at some point not to speak those curses over our kids because things were spoken over us. I mean, I was not the cleanest of kids growing up, and I was a handful, and I was a pain, and my kids are different. And but that is based on everything that's happened to us.
Yeah.
Well, I think I can also look at it too, and like when my dad struggled as a father to me, he didn't know his father.
Yeah,
and his father as in God. His relationship with God was not right, and that was the time that he struggled as a father with me. Now, if you look, when he began that relationship and committed his life to God, that was when my brother was there. And if you look from that point forward, he's done an amazing job,
right?
You know, and the same with my mom. And I don't think, because you said something, it's like you're trying to not do what your parents did. And I think the easiest thing that I learned, that it's not that I'm not going to do what they did or use this bad example for my good, but because I've built a relationship with God, that's how I know how to parent properly. That's how I know how to make those decisions. That's how I know when my son makes me want to punch him in the throat that I need to go take a breath, step back, and not react off of emotion, but make sure that the decision that I'm making is a biblical decision.
WWJP.
There you go.
Where would Jesus punch?
I was like, you threw me off. I was like, hang on. What? Just turn the other cheek, son. But I think it is 100% when you have that strong relationship with God, when you know how to hear and listen to the Holy Spirit, it helps you out with how to be a father. Mm-hmm. And it helps direct your discipline. It helps direct your leadership. Right. It helps direct everything. But the key is that you have to be able to listen to it.
Well,
and you have to be able to act on it.
You're changing completely in the process.
Well, and that's where I say I'm lucky. You know, I didn't see the picture of my dad being saved early in life, but luckily I was saved and understood it when my kids were young, because my discipline at that point changed. It was a point of inflection, right? I mean, that's where, you know you're saved and you're walking this line. At a point, it changes you. You died to self, and where I was a little more strict and overbearing in my discipline, it changed to nurturing and listening and trying to find commonality in why this was happening.
Oh, there's still a lot of strict there.
There is, in my sense too. My wife says, tell it, don't yell it, because she'll.
Sometimes you have to yell it because you've told it 5 times,
right?
And now you're at the point to where, well, if they can't hear me as I'm telling them, I'm just going to have to yell.
I'm the no dad.
We have a thing in law enforcement that's ask, tell, make.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to do something, then I'm going to tell you to do it,
But still.
and now I'm going to have to make you. Yeah.
That's
works
where
in,
it changed,
It
though.
works in
ATM.
fatherhood, too.
Ask, tell, make. ATM.
Yeah.
Anytime money.
That's like.
Well, and I think
Da, da, da,
I
da.
think we can plug for maybe the next. I'll share it in. I think our next podcast or one coming up where I feel like God has been, and I've talked to several guys, several people, but especially men, where God is taking who they are and he's going, look, I just need to reestablish your identity.
Yes.
And it's like, it's this change. And for me, it has been so liberating, so freeing, so like, and I do the same job. I'm in the same place, blah, 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 all those things. But he's like, look, I need to show you something. And I need to show you because I made you on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot. And I feel like, the church term or whatever is like, I've been chewing on this thing. I've been meditating on it.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I have been all over this thing for probably like the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've got a grasp where I can kind of relay the information. But I'm what I'm seeing in men across the board and different people, from young adult men to our age guys to guys older than us. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter
When you start.
And it's like,
Come on.
no, and it's not like because you're bad. It's not because you're wrong. It's like, dude, there is a full plan, and then there's your idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's a full plan, and then there's what we settle for.
Right.
There's a full plan, and there's, well, I'm doing this. I got this.
Fool's plan.
And it's like, oh, that would have been good. Why didn't I think of that? I don't know, because it didn't. And
The Podfather did.
in
I
it
got you.
has just been like, it's been amazing. It really has been probably one of the most life-changing moments. And it's not with all the bells and whistles and like salvation or like baptism, no matter however many times. It's like as a man, as a person, as a believer, as a follower, as a dad, as an employee, as all these things, this weight just went.
Once it's like you walk through freedom, you walk through like a book like Wow That Heart or something. You talk about the wounds.
Is that fiction?
No, sorry.
That's where the wild things are.
Yeah,
He's missing out.
that's my favorite kid's book, man. Where the Wild Things Are. I used
So
to
you
love
do
that
read
book.
fiction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great.
So,
Children's fiction.
it's big words, more pictures than anything.
That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
No.
That's a good book.
You guys, come on. I'm gonna go back to Chicago.
Yeah.
Southside.
Where?
Southside.
Outside. Come on.
At least I
Southside.
could give some entertainment value here, but being the pick on
yes.
source.
Hey, look.
We love you.
If you're checking us out, I said we'll talk about this. I don't know if it'll be the next episode, but one coming up. God reestablished an identity. Who are you supposed to be? When you look in the mirror, what do you see?
Yeah.
And that's been a big part. When you look, what do you see? And jot it down, write it down. Tell me what you see. And I'm saying that to you as in you're looking at you in the mirror. Tell me what you see and be honest, be bold, be brutal. What is it? Is a topic that I'd love for us to get into and explore. For our Father's Day episode,
Love you,
as dads, as men who have a wide range of experience, not only in
Yeah.
jobs and kids and all those things, but as in dads, as being raised. We've all come to the same place where we see God as first and foremost our Father, our Lord, our Savior, all of those things. And we want to encourage you, if you've had a tough time with dad, take a breath, hold on, and ask God to show you. Ask God to speak to you. Ask God to move in that place in your life. If you've had a great relationship with dad, be thankful, love, enjoy that. Give your dad a hug. Give him a call. We appreciate you tuning in. John, you got anything?
I don't.
Jeff?
Happy Father's Day to my dad and my father-in-law, who are both great examples of love and leadership and
There you go.
just what I want to be more of.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. To mine, this year I got you a possum in a box, and I hope you enjoy it. I've had him in there for a while, checking the box. Love you guys. Check us out. YouTube, Spotify, all those things. I mean, if you've made it this far, you know where to find us. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell people that you even like a little bit. We're glad you joined us for Close Cover Podcast. John, Jeff, my name is Jason. We got the Podfather, James, behind the cameras. We appreciate you tuning in.
We gotta have him sit.
Love
in
ya.
one time.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see.
He's like working. No, I got to work the cameras.